Today we're going to arrange proportions using cross products. Our goal is to apply and extend previous understanding to create equations. In this lesson, you will analyze word problems and think of multiple ways to set up proportions. So, let's get started. Is there another way to set up proportion expressions? In previous lessons, I stressed the importance of looking at the nouns that you're dealing with in order to set up proportions. And we really only focused on setting up the nouns in one way, for cross products. But there is another way. Let's investigate. So in the previous lesson, we talked about a person's weight on Earth versus their weight on the moon. So today we're going to take it a step further. We're going to think about what our weight could be on another planet. Well, moon is not a planet, by the way, but on a different planet other than Earth. So let's look at Mars. A person who weighs 130 pounds on Earth would weigh 49 pounds on Mars. So, Layla, she gained a pound, weighs 19 pounds. How much would she weigh on Mars? Is there more than one way to solve this proportion? Well, in previous lessons, we looked at the nouns. We have 130 pounds, and we have 49 pounds. So, we have to look a little bit further beyond that because we're dealing with pounds for both. But we have Earth pounds and Martian pounds. So in previous tutorials, what we did was we said, okay, well, let's first look at the first ratio. We have 130 to 49. And I have Earth over Mars. So we have 130 pounds on Earth to 49 pounds on Mars. And then we looked at the second ratio. We had, and I should actually do that in a different color. So we have 49 pounds. And we have Earth pounds as our numerator. So I'm going to keep that in the green color just as a reminder. Versus our weight on Mars. I don't know yet what she would weigh on Mars, so I'm going to use an X or an M for my variable. I picked an M because that reminds me that Mars is the weight that I'm looking for. So in previous problems, we've set up the tutorials in this way. Now, there is another way you could do this. We could also flip the proportions. We can say, instead of saying Earth over Mars, we can say Mars over Earth. So in this case, we would have, again, focusing in on just the first ratio, 49 over 130 equals, I should have these in black, X or M over 19. And in both cases, if we use cross products, we are going to get the same answer. In my first case, again, the lazy way, we would get 130 M equals 49 times 19. And in the second case, again, bringing them straight down once we go across, we would have 49 times 19, or 19 times 49, equals 130 times M. So in both scenarios, the algebra equation that we end up with is 130 times what number equals 931, because when you multiply 49 times 19, you get 931. I'm not even going to solve this problem just yet. In both of these cases, we're looking at the first ratio and the second ratio. For some students, that's the easiest way to solve a proportion. Is there another way? Yes. Is there another way to use the lazy way or cross products? Yes. I want you to think back of the two proportions that you had. So let's look at the same problem and now think of another way we can organize our nouns. Again, you still have to know your nouns. So I'm going to put Earth in green and Mars, our red planet, in red. So in this case, we can go in order and say, let's put our Earth weight over our Martian weight. Can we do that? Yes. But can we also just put them in groups? In other words, which we did in the previous problem, in other words, can we say Earth to Mars? Let's see how that will work. Well, we have Earth weights. So let's first look at our Earth weights. We have pounds on Earth and pounds on Earth. So we have 130 to 19 equals Martian weight. Well, our first Martian weight is 49. And our question is how much would she weigh on Mars? So that, of course, is X or M in this case I'm going to use. And now we have our proportions. So our first proportion is 130 to 19. And our second proportion is 49 to M. So in this case, we've put it into categories. We have our Earth weights compared to the Martian weights. So this is a different type of setting up a problem, but will it still work? Well, let's look. When we use cross products, 130 times M, bring it down, equals 19 times 49. And we know that from the previous page, which I'll go right back to, that we do have that proportion set up. So we still get 130 times what number equals 931. For some students, this is an easier way to look at it. For some students, it makes no difference, and for some students, it's easier to put them in categories the first way that I explained, as well as how I explained in the previous tutorial introducing cross products. And it also might vary from problem to problem. In this case, it's pounds and pounds, so it's a little different. But if you have supplies versus the cost, sometimes it's easier to just put the cost in one ratio and the supplies in another. So in this case, the thing to remember, though, is that you need to still have some understanding of which ratio needs to go in the numerator versus the denominator, because if I did flip this number, I would not get the same expression. If I put 130 over 19 equals what over 49? So in this case, both my numerators have to be my bigger numbers, basically. So I know that a person on Mars is going to weigh less than on the moon. So Earth, 130 to 49. So again, I have that too. So there's a reason I put that way in the first place, and I'll clean this up a little so you don't have so many arrows confusing you. But I did put them across from each other when I first explained it, just kind of to remind yourself. And that's a good strategy. Look at your first answer. We have 130. Look at your second, 19. So that's your denominator. And then again, we have 49 as our numerator, and we have M as our denominator. So those are all ways that it can help you setting up a proportion. Now let's see if we can solve this thing. 130 times what number is 931? Well, in order to isolate the variable, we can divide both numbers by 130. So when we solve that, we will get a decimal. We know we're going to get a decimal because it doesn't end in a 0. we will get her weight on Mars. Go ahead and take a minute to pause the tutorial and see if you can solve. Round to the nearest hundredths. So when we solve, we know that 130 will go into 931 7 times, and our decimal is 1/6. So she weighs about 7 pounds on Mars. Layla weighs about 7 pounds on Mars. So again, when we analyze this problem, does a person weigh more on Earth or on Mars? We know that they weigh more on Earth. And even thinking back to your previous problems, does a person weigh more on the moon or on Mars? And we know, of course, think about, which one should be heavier, which one should be lighter, which one should be the larger number, which one should be the smaller number. If you ask yourself those questions, that'll help you. So let's have you try. How much would a 900-pound horse weigh on Mars? Do you think you could lift the horse on Mars? So, 900 pounds is usually a little too heavy for most of us on Earth. But how much would that horse weigh on Mars? So, use your previous understanding of ratios to find out how much a horse would weigh on Mars. And do you think you could find the weight of yourself and other animals and people on other planets? Go ahead and try to research some of that. And as a bonus, you can calculate your weight on other planetary bodies. Go ahead and pause the tutorial and solve the problem now. In this lesson, you have looked at proportions in multiple ways, and you have set up cross products in 2 different formats. Remember, it's always important to analyze the problem carefully. You can, of course, analyze your nouns, numerator and denominator, or you can look at each specific item as its separate ratio that you're comparing. So both of those are ways that you can help set up proportions and solve them in multiple ways. Can you think of other ways you think you can set up proportion problems, not necessarily using cross products? We will investigate that in other tutorials. Great job today, and keep being creative.